Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Laura Reed, and I am Maine Community Foundation's Director of Resources and Community Engagement. We're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm joined today by my two colleagues that will be assisting me with this presentation. Katie Howard, our community partner who serves Cumberland and Oxford, is joining me today, and Joey Lindaro, our community impact associate. If you have questions during the presentation, please add them to the Q&A. However, I just want to let you know that we're not going to answer the questions posted in the Q&A or call on those who have their hands raised until the end of the presentation. Katie's going to monitor the Q&A and she'll interrupt me if she feels that there's a question that should be answered during the presentation. And at the very end of the presentation, we will look back at those Q&A questions. You can post them at that time as well. You can raise your hands and we'll try to go over as many questions as we can. We should have about 15 to 20 minutes at the end for questions. And within 2 weeks after we have recorded this today, we will be sending you an email and letting you know that we have links on our website to the recording as well as the slides. And the slides will be complete with the notes that I'm going to share today. So please do not feel pressured to write everything down. A community foundation is a public charity dedicated to improving the lives of people in a certain geographic area by combining financial resources with issue expertise and community partnerships. Maine Community Foundation was founded in 1983. We are a statewide community foundation. We work in all 16 counties. There's no part of Maine we don't reach and embrace with open arms. Our vision is that Maine is a vibrant and equitable place where people and communities thrive. And our mission at Maine Community Foundation, or purpose rather, is to bring people and resources together to build a better Maine. We've been working at
Oh,
this
wait,
for
hold on just a second, Laura. Someone just said they couldn't hear you, but I can hear you just fine. Can other people hear? So I think it just might be a problem for that one person.
okay. Well, for the person who cannot hear us, and maybe one of you can put this in the chat, but this will be recorded. So if they aren't able to work out the audio, they'll be able to watch the recording at the end after it's complete. So again, Maine CF's mission or purpose is to bring people and resources together to build a better Maine. We've been working at this for 40 years. Our commitment to working and partnering locally is what sets us apart. Maine CF's county funds and our committee work gives voice to our community's aspirations and challenges as we work together to build a better Maine. So today's webinar is on our community building grant program. Our community building grant program is a grassroots grant program that makes grants across the state. Funding comes from dedicated permanent county funds, but also some other related funds as well. Applicants don't apply at Maine Community Foundation to a specific fund, but rather to one of our competitive grant programs, which is great because it would be way more complicated to figure out exactly which fund, and there are far fewer grant programs that you would need to navigate. Under 20 grant programs on our website listed. So in this case, we're talking about applying to the Community Building Grant Program. Proposals are reviewed by a committee of local committee members who either live or work in that county or region. We have 15 review committees. There are 12 single county review committees and 2 regional committees. The regional committees are the Western Mountains Committee, which is Franklin and Somerset combined, and Southern Midcoast, which is Lincoln and Saginaw. We also have a statewide committee seated solely for grant-making purposes. Throughout the presentation, I will answer some of the most frequently asked questions by applicants. So we'll go ahead and start that off with one of the most frequently asked questions is who is eligible to apply? More information is available on our website, but the summary of that is that it's nonprofit charitable organizations that are tax exempt under sections 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code, and also classified as organizations described as sections 509A1 and 509A2, municipalities, public schools, public agencies working for the state of Maine, tribal governments or political subdivisions recognized by the Department of Interior, and groups without any tax status may apply using a fiscal sponsor. Again, you can visit our website for additional information on who is eligible to apply, and there's also information there about our fiscal sponsorship agreements. Another frequently asked question is, will my proposal be shared with donors who have donor advised funds at Maine Community Foundation? All proposals that meet the grant program criteria, so in this case, the community building criteria, will be added to our online donor portal called Giving Together for donors to review and consider funding. So you also have to meet the eligibility and grant guidelines as well as that criteria. So those that are eligible go up on the Giving Together or donor portal. And for those donors who do not use that online system, don't dismay, because we have staff members who work with folks directly who do not use that system. Donors can choose to partially or fully support a proposal. And please note that proposals determined by staff to be ineligible because they don't meet the eligibility grant guidelines, or in this case, the community building criteria, will not be shared with donors. You can see here too in the slide the community building stats for 2024. Community building is our largest grant program. It receives the most proposals and supports the broadest range of projects and organizations across the state, including arts, education, environment, economic development, and human services. In 2024, we received 594 proposals from across the state. That's noted in the slide. Our donor portal or Giving Together program allows us to fund more, which is why the slide breaks down how many awards were issued by committees and how many were issued by donors. And that's at the time of the committee meetings in April. So there were 295 total between our committees and donors. In 2025, the application deadline is Friday, February 14th at 11:59 p.m. I want to talk about this just for a few minutes. Some folks might be familiar with us saying February 15th is the deadline for community building. It is not this year. The 15th falls on a Saturday. And if we waited until Monday, that is a federal holiday. So we are going to have the cutoff this year, Friday, February 14th. It's even hard for me to remember that, Friday, February 14th at 11:59 p.m. I also want to point out that we do not have staff available on Friday the 14th between 5 p.m. and 11:59 p.m. So it would be highly recommended that you start your application and try to figure out what technical difficulties you're having before the end of the business day on February 14th at 5 p.m. The max grant award is $10,000. In 2024, 39% of the applicants overall received grants. However, this varies greatly by county. So it could be anywhere from 25% to 75%. As the number of proposals received varies by county, as well as the resources that we have to award by county. That's because some of our county funds have existed since 1986, and our newest county fund was established in 2018. And again, we get various numbers of proposals across various counties. So Cumberland, Hancock, and our statewide pool have anywhere between 75 and 100 applications. So the percentage of applicants that receive grants does vary. And again, you can look at our website to see more specific stats by county. A frequently asked question is, may my organization apply in consecutive years? Yes. One proposal per grant program per year, regardless if you received funding in a previous year. And for example, you could submit one proposal to community building grant program for that February 14th deadline. You could submit another one for one of our fall grant programs, such as the Maine Expansion Arts Grant Program. Our community building webpage provides a link to the most recent awards by county, as I mentioned. And at the end of the presentation, Joey Landaro is going to put that link in the chat for you so you can access it easily. Please note, Maine CF's eligibility and grant guidelines are also posted on our website, and they apply to all of our competitive grant programs. And there, once you go to that website and you see those, there is one specific section that is called What We Will Not Fund Without Exception. We have listed that detailed information here in this slide. but I am going to say it out loud again because these are things we cannot fund. So it's important to note these. Expenses already incurred, regranting to us. And so that really, I'm going to pause there for a second. That's really more about a project application because general support can be used however you choose to, but it's not intended to be retroactive. Regranting to a secondary grantee through a competitive process, political campaigns, lobbying in the form of calls to action or a specific vote, and religious activities, including but not limited to religious services, promotion of religious beliefs, or activities that are restricted to church or religious group membership. Again, this is a list of the activities we do not fund at Maine Community Foundation. So the criteria for the community building grant program is listed here in the slide. These are the same 3 core criteria we have used in recent years, and we will continue to offer both general support and project support this year. The first criteria listed is invest in people by increasing skills, abilities, knowledge, and/or well-being. What the review committee is going to try to do when they look at your proposal or your application is to try to understand how people will benefit from the work you do or the proposed activities. And then the next criteria is engage the people you serve in the design, delivery, and/or evaluation of the work. Again, the review committee will evaluate the breadth and depth of the engagement with the population you're serving. And the final criteria is strengthen community resources, including organizations, partnerships, and the built and natural environment. While people are community resources, here what we are asking you to explain is how you are strengthening your organization, partnerships, buildings, or the natural environment. Responses could focus on a resource that everyone in the community would have access to, such as a community park, or it could be a unique program that your organization provides, or a partnership between your organization and a municipality that offers a critical service to certain members of a community. The review committee here is looking specifically for this third criteria to see how a community resource might be improved, used more, or made more accessible. Another frequently asked question is, how do I figure out if I'm eligible to apply based on that criteria? So if you are an organization and you're applying for general support, you would think about how your organization meets this criteria. How do you as an organization invest in people, engage the people you serve, and strengthen the community? If you're applying for project support, you would think about it in terms of how does my project meet the criteria? So does this project invest in people, engage the people served, and strengthen a community resource? The types of funding that are offered, as I mentioned before, are general support and project support. In 2022, the Community Building Grant Program began offering general support to organizations with annual expenses below $500,000. So from the moment we started offering general support, it was always related to this annual expenses being below $500,000 for smaller organizations. One of the most frequently asked questions that we received when we started offering both general and project support was from the organizations that had an annual expense below $500,000. Which one should they be applying for? So as there's only one funding source, we don't have separate funding sources for project and general. In 2024, we decided to simplify and tie the eligibility for each type of funding to the applicant's annual expenses. So what that means is that if you have annual expenses below $500,000, you're only eligible to apply for general. If your annual expenses are at or above $500,000, you are only eligible to apply for project. This might seem like a really big change, but it's not, because general support can be used to support projects and they can be new, ongoing, expanding. General support is flexible funding, so it really can be for anything. And larger organizations were never eligible to apply for anything but project. They weren't eligible to apply for general. This program focuses on grassroots grant program. It's a grassroots grant program focusing on smaller organizations. However, we know larger organizations are also meeting some of the unmet needs in the community. So we have retained project support as a funding option for larger organizations. When we started offering general support, we were concerned that our review committees might favor project grants because you have more clearly stated goals, activities, and a very specific budget to look at. We've tried to ensure that does not happen, and that they are treated equally by establishing target funding goals for each committee based on the amounts requested for each type of funding. So we encourage committees to make awards that maintain that general percentage between the two types of request. So what I mean is if they have a specific budget and they had 50% of their applications were general, 50% of their applications were project, they would try to use their funding to support equally those. If it came in so it was 70% general and 30% project, they would be funding more general than they would project. And those are goals that they try to follow. In this one, we're going to break it down and talk specifically in this slide and in this part of the presentation just about general, and then we'll talk more specifically about project. So the slide indicates that general support, as I mentioned before, is flexible funding. That's for any type of funding. It could be new, expanding, or ongoing programs. It can be for your operating needs, your operating budget. It can be it can even include capital expenses. You have to be located in Maine, and we define that as your organization has to have a Maine address. And again, you're looking at your annual expenses, or another way to say that would be your most recent completed fiscal or financial year expenses, and they have to be below 500,000. And you can't be a municipality, a public school, a government agency, or a faith-based organization. So if you are any of those, you may still provide project grant support for all of the applicants noted that I just mentioned, right? Because you would be ineligible for general, but you might still be eligible for project. Here's some advice when you're filling out an application or proposal, completing a proposal for general support. We want you to talk about all the work that your organization does. Mention past successes and future plans. What we don't want you to do is to talk about how you plan to spend the grant or focus on one aspect of your work or a specific project. Again, it's general support. So if you're applying for general support, we want to learn about your organization. We ultimately want to know what you do to make a difference in the lives of the people that you serve. A frequently asked question is, why aren't those organizations that I mentioned, like municipalities, government agencies, public schools, or faith-based organizations, eligible? For municipalities, government agencies, and public schools, Maine CF's funding should not replace public funding sources for general or operating support. For faith-based organizations, this goes back to those eligibility and grant guidelines that I mentioned earlier in the presentation, that we say that we will not fund without exception religious activities, including but not limited to religious services, promotion of religious beliefs, or activities that are restricted to church or religious group membership. So that's why we cannot provide general support to faith-based organizations, because there would be no way to know what the money was being spent on, because it is flexible. But however, they may still be eligible to apply for project support. And for project support, this is new projects only. Expanding or ongoing projects are not eligible to apply for funding. And in the slide, you can see that we define that as within the first 2 years. Again, you need to have a Maine address. The expenses are at or above 500,000. Noting again that municipalities, government agencies, public schools, and faith-based organizations can apply, and it doesn't matter what their budget is, because this is the only type of funding they're eligible to apply for. Anyone applying for project budget needs to have a total project budget that doesn't exceed 100,000. Again, noting this is a grassroots grant program with a maximum award of $10,000. And the grant program is not intended to support larger scale projects. So stated another way, a $10,000 award would only make up 1/10 of a $100,000 project budget. Although large and broad, this is a very competitive grant program, and it's not designed again to provide support to all projects. The project proposals most likely to be funded will be really specific, discrete projects that meet the community building criteria. So again, invest in people, engage the people you serve, and strengthen community resources. It's going to be key that your projects do that and that they are new projects within the first 2 years. Community building grants do not support, and this is noted in the slide, we do not support endowments, annual appeals, or scholarships. And here's some advice regarding applying for project support. And what we want to know with project support is we want to be very specific. We want you to tell us about the goals, the activities, and the budget for that very specific project that you're applying for. We don't want you to generalize. We want to know why this project is important, what activities are included, how you will spend the grant. Another frequently asked question is, may I include indirect or administrative costs in the project budget? The project budget may include up to 20% of the total amount requested from Maine CF for administrative costs. These funds may be used for overhead or operating expenses. So examples of that might be rent, utilities, bookkeeping. They can be a line item that you would just label administrative costs. And you just have to you don't need to say specifically how you're going to use it. You can just generalize administrative costs. You may calculate the amount based on the percentage of the total. So if you're asking for 10,000, you could ask for 2,000. That's the 20% for administrative costs. And in this slide, it says primary counties served. Identify the one county that will most directly benefit from funding requested in this proposal. So you might be asking, and this is something frequently we get asked, why does that matter? So it matters because these funds were raised with specific counties in mind. So the funds have to be spent in those counties. The Piscataquis Fund would need to be spent in Piscataquis County. In addition to that, when you identify the primary county served, that helps us decide which committee is supposed to be reviewing the proposal. And in addition to that, if you're eligible and you meet the criteria and your proposal gets put on that Giving Together or donor portal, as I mentioned, we are going to sort those by county, or we're going to tag it to a county because our donors can go in and sort by county if they have specific county interests. So that's why it matters. So a little bit about how do you figure out which one, like which primary county served. Applying for a general support grant, you're serving 2 counties, you would select the county in which your organization or main office is located. If you're applying for project support and you're serving 2 counties, select the primary population served by the project. So if it's going to benefit Androscoggin a little bit more than, say, Cumberland, and you're offering it in both locations, then you would mark Androscoggin. And if you're applying for general support or project support and you're serving 3 counties, you need to select statewide. And so that's really specific advice that is listed in a guidance document that I'm going to reference later. Also, when you see the slides, and you can download those from our website, all of these notes that go along with these slides will be there. So if you're thinking, which one did they say? And you can also follow up with one of our staff members if you're concerned or confused about which primary county you're serving. The community building timeline is the last slide in this section, and then we're going to show you some screenshots to make navigating our website a little bit easier. So here it's all broken down for you, the dates and the activities that will be happening. All proposals received are pre-screened by staff to determine their eligibility. So again, this kicks off for us internally on the deadline of February 14th. And so depending on the number of proposals received, a subcommittee may also be used to assess alignment with the criteria and limit the final review pool. I mentioned before that our statewide committee, Cumberland and Hancock, receive a large volume of proposals. So we often have to limit the final pool. All proposals included in the final review pool are assigned to a county advisor or staff member who will serve as the lead reviewer and follow up with the applicant listed in the application by telephone in late March or April. If you do not receive a phone call, right? So I say everyone who's in the final pool is going to receive a phone call. This part's pretty critical. You won't receive a phone call if your proposal is not included in the final review pool. So if it's pre-screened out because it was not eligible, or the final review pool for a large pool, such as statewide, they're only going to call the folks who are in the final pool. Each county or regional committee collectively reviews all the proposals included in that final review pool for their county or region and decides which proposals to fund. The committee's goal is to identify the strongest proposals that meet our criteria, represent diverse sectors, geography, and populations to have the greatest positive impact on strengthening communities. So previously I noted our donor portal or Giving Together program also allows for donors to participate. So donors will view them and they may fund proposals before the committee even meets. So when a donor makes a grant, we will immediately send a letter and a check by regular mail. And if your request was partially funded by a donor, the review committee will consider supporting the remaining amount. If your request was fully funded by a donor, the review committee will decline further support so that they can fund other proposals. Donors may also choose to support your proposal after the committee has met. So you may get a decline from a committee, but then in November, you might receive an award because we do leave these up on our website for the donor portal. Sorry, not the website, but the donor portal for a year to the end of the year. So it's not uncommon for folks to be doing their end of year giving and come across a proposal that they want to fund. Something less likely to happen, but it still does happen, is that not committees, but donors sometimes overfund a proposal. So if you ask for 10,000, committees can only give you 10,000. They do not overfund, but donors sometimes like a proposal enough to give it additional funding. Again, that's uncommon, but it is possible. Our notifications for awards and declines will be emailed through our online system. And if you were declined, that is the only notification you are going to receive. If you are awarded a grant, you will receive you'll get a letter in the mail with a check on. And so at this time, I'm going to ask Joey to put in the chat the address that those awards and declines come from. It comes from grant proposals at mainecf.org. We encourage you to put that in your accepted addresses so that your notification doesn't go to spam or junk mail. Again, if you receive an award, you will not only receive the notification electronically, but you'll receive a hard copy of the letter with the award and a check or an ACH payment. So now's where I want to transition. I mentioned this was the last slide in this section, but there's a couple more slides because I want to make sure that you know how to access our online resources as well as our online application process. If you were to put in mainecf.org, it would take you to this homepage. And you can review our grant programs by clicking on grants. You see an orange arrow in the top bar there noting grants. When you select that, there's a drop-down menu and you can select available grants and deadlines. If you did that, you would come to this page and you could select community building. Again, there's an orange arrow on the left-hand side of the slide and it's I know it's in small print, but it does say community building. If you clicked on community building, it would take you to this page. This is a really important page because this is where you find all of our community building information. Here you'll find several links to different resources. And again, at the end of the presentation, Joey's going to drop a bunch of those links right into the chat for you so they'll be easily accessible. We have a frequently asked questions document that appears here. We also have that Word document that I mentioned where we have a guidance embedded in that Word document. So the Word document contains the entire application, but there's guidance in there that you will not find in the application online. It would make the application online way too long. And we put this guidance in there and it's quite specific and it goes to the point of helping you understand how to fill out each question so that you know how the committee is going to look at those questions, what they're looking for. We've also taken that guidance document and we have translated it into 4 languages. So it's in Arabic, French, Portuguese, and Spanish. The online application is only in English. And the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be sending an email, Maine Community Foundation will, to everyone who registered for today's webinar. And it will include links in it to access our website to get to these resources, because this page that's showing in the slide right now will also have a link to today's slides with notes, as well as the recording. It's from this page, a little bit further down, you can't see it in the slide, that there is a section called Quick Links or Quick Overview, which includes critical program information. So earlier I mentioned there's different stats broken down by each county. There's also a list of the applications that were supported in the last 3 years. All of that you can access through this web page. And again, this will be a link that Joy will drop in the chat when we're done. Before we review the staff contacts, I want to make sure you know how to apply. So each of the slides that I have been clicking through, so I'm going to go back one. So when you are at this page, you see that there's an orange arrow at the top of the page pointing to a button that's orange or coral colored that says apply. It's there. We go to a new page, it's there too. So that is the button you want to use to apply. Once you click on that button, it's going to take you here. And you're going to see online grant applications or online scholarship applications. You're going to click on the apply here under the online grant applications. When you arrive at that page, it's going to ask you to log in or register. You're going to log in if you've previously used our online grant system and type in your information. If this is your first time using our online grant system, you're going to need to create an account. You can do this by using your name and email address or by using one of your social media accounts. And there's also on the slide, it says click here 3 different times, and it's kind of in a blue text. The third one down says click here for step-by-step instructions on how to start a new grant application. So you can even access additional information right from this page. Also important to note here that you can save your work. You don't have to sit down and get it all done in one session. You can also add collaborators who can read and edit your proposal. We're going to pause for a little bit at this screen because I know folks will be curious and want to write down your staff contact for your county, your email and phone. For those individuals, I want to point out that we did have some staffing changes this year. We added 3 new community partners to our team. So this slide represents the most recent assignments. In terms of when would it be helpful, this is another frequently asked question, when would it be helpful to speak with a staff member? Applicants can contact a staff member before you submit your proposal to ask questions, to help you determine if your funding request is aligned with the criteria. And so we are accessible for you to contact. At the same time, I want to point out that it's not required for you to contact us, but we are accessible and ready to speak with you if you do have questions or need some additional guidance. And then applicants may also want to contact the staff contact for their county if they receive a decline notification, like so an electronic notification that you've been declined. We can often give you specific feedback about why your application was declined. Unfortunately, sometimes the feedback is it was a great proposal. We just had a very large proposal pool and not enough resources to go around. And you may also want to contact a staff member if you receive funding, but something changes significantly after you receive that funding. You can also follow up with staff. Before we move on to the Q&A, I want to encourage you to use those additional resources that are posted on that community building webpage that I mentioned, specifically that Word version of the application. It has lots of guidance included in it that you will find helpful when drafting your application. And it does provide some insight to what the reviewers are looking for when they read your proposal. Don't dismay if you haven't gotten all the or couldn't read the contact slide or weren't able to get the information off that. Again, you'll be able to access it from the links that Joey's about to post in the chat. Given some folks may choose to drop off this webinar during the question and answer time, I want to thank everybody today for joining us. If you have basic or simple questions about the information we've shared, please use this time to ask your questions. Again, Katie is going to help me go through the Q&A questions that have been posted, and also we'll try to answer hands that are raised. If you have specific or detailed questions that really relate to your specific project or your organization, we ask you to hold those questions and please contact the appropriate county staff member who was listed on the prior slide, and have either an email or a telephone conversation with them about your very specific question. This time is meant for basic or simple questions that might apply to all folks who are attending the webinar. We're going to begin to answer those. I'm going to stop sharing at this point. And again, thank you all for joining us, and let's hop into the Q&A.
All right, we've got a few questions in the Q&A. So I'm just going to start at the top and read through them. So the first question is about the Belvedere Historic Preservation Program. And someone just asking, just confirming that that's no longer a separate grant program.
That is correct.
And if you have more questions about that, we're happy to chat directly with your community partner instead of going into it right now, but you would just be applying to community building.
Correct.
The next one is, can you please revisit the 501c3 and 509A1, A2 criteria?
So I would say that that is available on our website, right? The very specific who is eligible to apply. So it's in it, those numbers are associated with the internal revenues tax codes. And so if you have specific questions, the listing that I went through is available on our website. But if you have specific questions about your eligibility, again, that's a question that we should probably have you contact a staff member.
Great. The next one, how do you define as a project that's within 2 years? Is there a specific date cutoff?
So that is a good question. So I would say at the time you're applying, that you started this program, this project within the last 2 years. There's no like begin and end date. So there is a little bit of flexibility to that, right? But we are hoping that they are new projects or programs that you started, let's say in 2023.
All right. Sorry, just getting a little distracted with the chat. Next question is about organizations that are contained within a larger organization, but are that are 100% self-funded. So, for example, the person asking the question is saying that their working budget is below 500,000, but they're contained within a university that has a budget well over 500,000.
Right. So again, I think that's a really specific question, and it would be best for you to talk with the staff member for that county, because if I can give you a response to that, but there's inevitably going to be a follow-up question to that, right? So we want to make sure we fully answer that question, and I think that's specific enough that you should speak with someone. In general, my response to that would be that the EIN number, right, like of the organization, the applicant. So the applicant's EIN number dictates which of those you're eligible for. So if you're having to apply as the University of Maine and you're part of the University of Maine, then you're not going to end up being eligible for general support. But again, it can be really specific. And if Katie wants to add something to that, I welcome anything you might want to add to that.
No, I think it's probably a good conversation for a community partner just to make sure we totally understand the situation. There's so many specific situations where it's hard to answer without really getting into the weeds.
Yeah, absolutely.
Up next, can you please clarify the amount of counties needed to serve to apply for statewide funding? And is statewide funding generally more competitive than county specific?
So you have to serve 3 or more counties to select statewide. Is it generally more competitive? I would say yes. It has one of the larger proposal pools. We see roughly, I would say, in the neighborhood of 90 to 100 proposals in the statewide pool. But again, you can see the specific stats on that by going into the community building webpage and clicking on the link and looking at what's been funded through statewide.
All right. Can you just talk about where this recording will be available? We had a couple people asking about
Yes,
that again.
absolutely. So back when I was sharing the slides and it showed the community building webpage, and there was a big box at the top of that slide, right? So, and that it will be listed with the FAQ, with that Microsoft Word version of the application. There'll be links right there. So it's all one-stop shopping for you, but you would want to go to mainecf.org, and then you'll want to click on grants and get to through the available grants page, get to the community building page, and all of those links will be at the top of the page. And I think Joey was going to put the community building, and probably has at this point, the community building website link in the chat. So you would use that link and it will get posted there as soon as it's available.
All right, we've got a few more. We intend to submit a youth development project grant and are open to partnering with other community organizations. Do you refer applicants to one another for such collaborations?
No, we do not. I think that might be a good opening though to mention something else, that if you are collaborating with another organization, sometimes that requires that you have a letter indicating the collaboration, and there's some specific guidance around that as well in the application. So just be aware that, for example, if you are working with a school or a tribal entity, you are required to have a letter of support so that we know that that collaboration exists.
And I would also add to that, that could be something you could chat with a community partner about. So whoever covers your county, they may have some ideas of who you might be able to partner with, but wouldn't be able to make those connections, wouldn't likely be able to help with that. Did I hear correctly that we shouldn't get into specifics about our new program, but talk generally about what our center does? And I assume this is for a general support proposal.
Yes. Katie, you want to take that for a second while I grab a drink?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is something we try to reiterate quite a bit. When you're requesting general support, we ask you to talk about what your organization does and not only talk about one project. It gives advisors, it's a little bit confusing, and we then don't understand that you do actually a lot of other things. And the funding you'd receive would not be restricted to that project. You can use it for anything that you like. That sound good, Laura?
Yeah, that was great.
All right.
By the way, we also hope to soon be putting up a video on our website that sort of describes again that difference between applying for general versus project in a really quick recorded video.
As someone new to grant requests, what is the best advice you can give as it comes to applying for a grant with no experience?
Oh, this is a great question. And Joey, I'm going to
Isn't
put
it?
you on the spot to go to our website and grab those documents. So we should put these in the chat as well. We have two different documents that we posted on our website last year, and they're in a PDF format. And one of them is sort of the top 10 tips, if you will, about applying for a grant. And those may be applicable to specifically Maine Community Foundation, but also to other funders. And there's another document there as well that talks about other funders, right? So how do you identify other funders? And these are one-page resources that are both found on our website. And so so that's kind of a general question, and we're going to give you a resource that you can reflect on. Katie, if you were going to give like one tip to that, I think one of my tips would be really read what that funder is asking for and follow that, because every funder is different. And so just pay attention to the details, because unfortunately, you don't want to spend time creating an application and then find out, oh, you do one of those activities listed on the things that we do not fund without exception. And so you've completed an entire application and we can't fund that. So I would say pay attention to the details. Katie, what would you say would be your number one thing?
My number one advice is always just to keep it really simple. Tell us what you're going to do in your own words. Sort of trying to write sort of fancily, can just be can make it a little bit more confusing. The direct, we're going to work with 20 kids. We're going to take them on a field trip. We're going to do it twice a week. Um, the people reading these are reading a lot at the same time. So the more direct, the more detail you can put in there, can be a lot more impactful. That's my
Great
hot tip.
advice. Another question?
Is it possible to have an eligible project that builds community but isn't necessarily open to the general public? For example, a school community.
I can see how that could happen, right? So again, I think that's sort of a question that it may be worth picking up the phone or sending an email and sort of running that by the community partner for your region or your county. Because I can see in situations where that could occur.
Can you explain the rationale for needing to put forth a new project every year? It can take many years to get projects off the ground, and projects need multi-year funding beyond $10,000.
Sure. So the program is not encouraging you to create new programs. It's just specifying that this program is designed only to fund new programs, right? We understand that it's difficult to have to dream up a new project every time you want to get funding, right? Like that could be another way of saying it, right? At the same time, we have limited resources with this particular program. And so how to use those resources, we've decided that we really want to focus on smaller organizations. So that's the general support piece, right? So those smaller organizations don't have to have a new project. They're getting general support so they can use it for new or ongoing or expanding. But for larger organizations, we have a limited amount of resources. So we've decided to fund only new projects. Katie, would you add anything to that?
Not particularly. I know that it's frustrating because we wish we had more funding to be able to open this up more. But we just did have to, we do have to have a limit,
Yeah, and
unfortunately.
not all, this is where you get into the details, right? Not all programs do require that, but this program, it is our largest program. We get 600 applications. And so if we opened that up for ongoing, right, it is somewhat of a volume and a lack of resources. Go ahead.
What percentage of funding for general grants can be applied to administrative costs? I heard the 20% can be applied for project grants.
Oh, so that's a good question. So for general support, you can apply it however you want. You could use all 100% of it, right? But because it's general support, it's flexible funding. You can use it entirely for operating. You could use it entirely for a project, a new program, or you could split it between the two. But it is flexible, unrestricted funding. You get to decide how to use it. It's just for project support. There is this, you can ask for 20% of it for administrative costs because we do appreciate that even with projects, there is overhead, right? And we want to give organizations that flexibility. We used to receive applications from folks who didn't know they could ask for administrative costs, right? And a lot of larger organizations um, uh, actually include that every time they submit one. So we wanted to make sure smaller organizations and larger organizations both knew that it was applicable, and we set it at 20% as a cap because some of the larger organizations they ask for 40 or 50 even, and we've drew the line and said we'll only do 20% of administrative across the board regardless of the size of your organization. It's open to everyone, and so that would be, hopefully that answers the question. It might have over answered the question, but
All right. The next one says, in qualifying for either general or project, do you need the actual operational budget or just a statement saying the applicant is either above or below 500,000?
so there's a part of the application that's going to there's a section called the financial information, like the organizational financial information, where you're going to have to provide both revenue and expense information. And I would say that that is yours. It's not going to be just a statement. You are signing off on the application, but there's actually a whole section that you will have to complete. So it's more than a statement. We have tried to simplify that the organizational's financial information. Do you have anything to add to that, Katie?
No, I think you'll see once you get into the application how you'll know all of that. And if you have specific questions about your budget, just reach out to your community partner.
Yeah. And I think it will help folks. We've changed the order this year so that you actually fill out the organizational financial information before you select what type of support you're asking for. So it will be more clear which you should be requesting. Katie, any others?
Two more quick ones. Can you apply if you received a community building grant last year?
Yes.
And if so, do you need to submit a report for last year's grant before applying?
No, you do not. So you do have to. So we handle grant reports on sort of an honor system, if you will. We like to learn from the grant reports that we do receive, and but you're not required to submit them, although they are encouraged. And the deadline for those is actually after, because we want to give you a whole year to do your work before you're actually submitting your grant report. So you would be applying for 2025 community building by February 14th, but you wouldn't be submitting your grant report until June for the prior year, for the 2024 grant that you received.
And then I think I have one more, and there's another one I'm going to answer individually. If your organization has previously applied, but a new person is in the organization is completing the application, does this person need to create a new account?
So I'm actually going to say that I am not the best person to answer that question. I do not believe they do, but I am going to ask Joey to actually answer that question.
Yes. Unfortunately, based on the current limitations of the system we're using now, you will have to create a new separate account. I also do encourage you that if you know that someone that previously worked for the organization had an account and had grant reports, past proposals, we can connect those to the new account. You just need to send an email to the grant proposals inbox with that request, and it will be me that fields that, and you'll get a response from me setting up the collaboration links to connect them all together, so you have all of the historical information that you're looking for as well.
And I think that's all we have. I don't see any hands raised, and our Q&A is empty.
Well, then I'm going to tag on to something that Joey just said and give folks a few, we have about 8 minutes left in case people have other burning questions that they would like to ask today. As you can see, I passed the mic to Joey because I am not the tech person on the team. And there are questions that we can't answer that Joey answers for us. And so that's why I would, again, really encourage folks to start your applications early, right? Even though the deadline goes all the way up to 11:59 to give you time we know many of you wear lots of hats in your communities. You have other full-time jobs and you're filling out applications at night. So you have until 11:59 to get it completed. However, staff are only available until 5. And in addition to that, if you're speaking with a community partner, they may not be able to, they're incredibly helpful, but we all have our limits. There might be a tech question that you're asking that we really can't answer for you, that we would have to pull in someone like Joey with his expertise to help answer that question. So it's best to try to start early in case you do run into a technical question. Katie, can you think of anything else?
Just had a question pop up. Someone's looking for a reminder on how to get that document that is a test run for filling out the actual grant. So I think that guidance document.
Yeah, that's a great place for us to end, I think, today. Yeah. So again, the community building website, which Joey had put a link to in the chat. If you go to the community building webpage, at the top of that, there's a bunch of different links available to you. One of them is an FAQ. Eventually the recording will be there. But in that section is a link to the Word document. And again, you can even complete it, a draft of it in the Word document. That's the document that has all the guidance included in it, and it has been translated into 4 other languages. You can compose your responses in there, and then you could even paste them into the online application. But that's where you will access it, and you should be able to download it as a Word doc. And we probably will just be giving you, when we send you a follow-up from this, it's going to tell you the resources are all up and available, and it will give you the link to that page. We're not going to attach a bunch of PDFs or put multiple links in there, because what we find, the links are helpful, but if we attach a lot of documents, it sometimes gets stuck in folks' spam or junk email, so you wouldn't receive it. So we'll give you that link to remind you how to get to the community building website to access all these resources. Again, we really appreciate your time. We appreciate you signing up to attend this and asking all these great questions. We learn from your questions. You might actually see yourself show up as the frequently asked question next year when I'm giving the presentation. It helps us improve our frequently asked questions document. We do have many community partners who are fantastic on this team, who are looking forward to hearing from you and answering your questions. So thank you again for joining us today, and we hope you have a great afternoon.